Welcome. Today is Thursday, March 11th, 2021. This is the ACIM Palm Beach Study Group. We are on page 17, which is chapter 2, section 1, and paragraph 3. The chapter is the separation and the atonement. And the section is the origins of separation. The Garden of Eden, or the pre-separation condition, was a state of mind in which nothing was needed. When Adam listened to the lies of the serpent, all he heard was untruth. You do not have to continue to believe what is not true unless you choose to do so. All that can literally disappear in the twinkling of an eye because it is merely a misperception. What is seen in dreams seems to be very real. Yet the Bible says that a deep sleep fell upon Adam, and nowhere is there reference to his waking up. The world has not yet experienced any comprehensive reawakening or rebirth. Such a rebirth is impossible as long as you continue to project or miscreate. It still remains within you, however, to extend as God extended his spirit to you. In reality, this is your only choice, because your free will was given you for your joy in creating the perfect. So we have another reference to the Bible here being explained, and it goes right to the beginning, the Garden of Eden, and the pre-separation, a state of mind in which nothing was needed because everything was perfect as God created it. And when Adam listened to the lies of the serpent, i.e., to the lie that he could separate himself from the Father, and remember, when they're talking about Adam, they're talking about you, they're talking about me, they're talking about all of us in the oneness of the child of God. So when we listened to the lies of the serpent, all we heard was untruth. That's the untruth of the ego. But we don't have to continue to believe this. We can change our mind. And all of that can literally disappear in the twinkling of an eye, in the change of the mind, because it is a misperception. And our mind is what is perceiving or misperceiving. We have the free will to choose to perceive the spirit, or we can choose to perceive the ego world. So, and then it says he fell into a dream, and that's what this is. We're in the dream of the ego world. We are all dreaming. It's not real. And like he says, in the Bible, it never says anything about him waking up from the dream. Now, I know that, in the Bible, it's Adam and Eve. Yes, and that's, again, an ego way, because it's being written within the ego world. So it's like there's two of them. Actually, there's only one of us, but Adam and Eve is the way we would think of it in our present condition. of male and female, of the duality. So in reality, in other words, in the spirit world, the only choice that you have is to extend as our Father extended to create us. We can also have that same ability to extend in what we create, just like the Father did. But we can't do that if we're completely we're operating within the ego system. Are there any questions or discussion? Well, let's go on then. All fear is ultimately reducible to the basic misperception that you have the ability to usurp the power of God. So, this is a very important piece of information here, that all fear is ultimately reducible to the basic misperception that you have the ability to usurp the power of God. Of course, you neither can nor have been able to do this. Here is the real basis for your escape from fear. The escape is brought about by your acceptance of the atonement, which enables you to realize that your errors never really occurred. Only after the deep sleep fell upon Adam could he experience nightmares. If a light is suddenly turned on while someone is dreaming a fearful dream, he may initially interpret the light as part of his dream and be afraid of it. However, when he awakens, the light is correctly perceived as the release from the dream, which is then no longer accorded reality. This release does not depend on illusions. The knowledge that illuminates not only sets you free, but also shows you clearly that you are free. So this is a good analogy of the process that it took to fall into the ego world and what's happening and how it is to release ourselves from the ego world. Again, are there any questions or comments? Paragraph 5. Whatever lies you may believe are of no concern to the miracle, which can heal any of them with equal ease. It makes no distinctions among misperceptions. Its sole concern is to distinguish between truth on the one hand and error on the other. So miracles may seem to be of greater magnitude than others. Some miracles may seem to be of greater magnitude than others. But remember the first principle in this course: there is no order of difficulty in miracles. In reality, you are perfectly unaffected by all the expressions of lack of love. These can be from yourself and others, from yourself to others, or from others to you. Peace is an attribute in you. You cannot find it outside. Illness is some form of external searching. Health is inner peace. It enables you to remain unshaken by lack of love from without, and capable, through your acceptance of miracles, of correcting the conditions proceeding from lack of love of others. Anyone care to comment?
Hello.
Yes, David.
Love is always there, but we don't always see it. It comes from our consciousness, or us being in spirit.
Yes.
This is going to be my understanding.
Okay. Anyone else? Well, let me go back a bit to point out a couple of things. Only after, this is back in paragraph 4, only after the deep sleep fell upon Adam could he experience nightmares. So only in that state of deep sleep was Adam experiencing the ego world. And so that's true for us. We are in a deep sleep while we're in the ego world, and we are experiencing quite a nightmare. So, but if the light is suddenly turned on when someone is dreaming a fearful dream, you may initially interpret the light itself as part of the dream and may be afraid of it. And that does happen with some people. They'll go into meditation, they'll start having a revelation. There's the experience of light and the oneness, what have you, for a brief moment. And some people actually get afraid at that point because we're so ingrained in fear in the ego world that's our trained reaction to all of this. And he says, but as soon as you realize that the light is the spirit and that it's nothing to be afraid of, then you're released from that. And so in reality, we are perfectly unaffected by all these expressions of lack of love, which is all these expressions of the ego world. In reality, none of it is really happening. We perceive it as happening, we think it's happening, but it's not happening. And that's where true forgiveness comes in, is realizing that none of it is real. I didn't do anything to you, you didn't do anything to me. Nothing that's happening in the ego world is real. And so that's why we forgive it. We forgive it because it's not even real. There's really nothing to forgive except to forgive ourselves for thinking that we're separate from our Father, separate from God. Any questions? Any comments?
I got one.
Yes, you do.
Hurt and anger comes in the ego world. Love comes in this in spirit, in the spirit world.
Yes.
the forgiveness is in, I guess, in the spirit world. It's the what do you call it? The ego world is the illusion.
Right.
The spirit world is the light, the consciousness. The ego world is the unconsciousness or the darkness. And the ego world is doesn't exist. You know, I guess, like I said before, it's
It's the nightmare.
right.
Yes, that's what it's telling us. Yes, Helena.
I don't know if anyone else feels like this, but when I read that sentence in paragraph 4 about the escape is brought about by your acceptance of the atonement, which enables you to realize that your errors never really occurred. As someone who is raised in an organized religion that really heaped guilt upon us, and, we were told that we were born with sin and we were guilty from the moment we breathed our first breath. I mean, that sentence is extremely freeing. It really does make everything that I was taught and really made to believe, it puts it in a perspective that is so much more loving and acceptable and freeing. So that's a powerful sentence.
Yes, it is. Thank you for bringing that up. Again, the escape is brought about by your acceptance of the atonement, which enables you to realize that your errors never really occurred because it all happened in a dream and the dream is not real.
John, everybody, we are born innocent.
Yes.
We're children, and the ego world makes us feel differently. And we look at each other. We have to look at ourselves as innocent. The world, the ego world, made us seem otherwise. But we're still, our foundation is innocence, and that never changes. Only if I don't know. Maybe you can finish my sentence for me.
Well, you did. That never changes.
Right.
That innocence never changes. We're always 100% innocent. From Spirit's point of view, from God's point of view, not the ego's point of view. So, so speaking of the acceptance of the atonement, we have finished section 1, and we're beginning section 2, which is the atonement as defense. So here we go. Paragraph 1. You can do anything I ask. Okay, so this is Jesus speaking. I have asked you to perform miracles and have made it clear that miracles are natural, corrective, healing, and universal. There is nothing they cannot do, but they cannot be performed in the spirit of doubt or fear. When you are afraid of anything, you are acknowledging its power to hurt you. Remember that where your heart is, there is your treasure also. You believe in what you value. If you are afraid, you are valuing wrongly. Your understanding will then inevitably value wrongly. And by endowing all thoughts with equal power, will inevitably destroy peace. That is why the Bible speaks of the peace of God which passeth understanding, quote. This peace is totally incapable of being shaken by errors of any kind. It denies the ability of anything not of God to affect you. This is the proper use of denial. It is not used to hide anything, but to correct error. It brings all error into the light. And since error and darkness are the same, it corrects error automatically. Anyone? Okay, well, you know, the language here is very it's very specific, and it's very absolute. In the ego world, we're not really prepared to believe that anything is 100%. There's always shades of gray. There's always a continuum between the positive and the negative, and that line is moving all of the time. It's never totally one thing or the other. But in the spirit world, from spirit's point of view, everything is 100%. And that's the way we're being spoken to here. That you know, it's only in the ego world that we have these fluctuations. In the spirit world, it's totally pure, it's total love, it's total. And so we need to kind of come to an understanding about that in our minds when we're trying to learn this material, because it's not our normal state of mind. It's so are there any questions about that? Well, let's go on to paragraph 2 then. True denial is a powerful protective device. You can and should deny any belief that error can hurt you. This kind of denial is not a concealment, but a correction. Your right mind depends on it. Denial of error is a strong defense of truth, but denial of truth results in miscreation, the projections of the ego. In the service of the right mind, the denial of error frees the mind and reestablishes the freedom of the will. When the will is really free, it cannot miscreate because it recognizes only truth. So true denial is a protective device. You can and should deny any belief that error can hurt you, that ego can hurt you. This kind of denial is not a concealment, but a correction. Your right mind, your spirit mind, depends on it. Denial of error, denial of ego, is a strong defense of truth, of spirit. But denial of truth, denial of spirit, results in miscreation. The projections of the ego are the miscreations that occur when we deny the truth, when we deny the spirit. In the service of the right mind, in the service of the spirit mind, the denial of error, the denial of ego, frees the mind and reestablishes the freedom of the will. When the will is really free, it cannot miscreate because it recognizes only truth. Paragraph 3. You can defend truth as well. You can defend truth as well as error. The means are easier to understand after the value of the goal is firmly established. It is a question of what it is for. Everyone defines his treasure. Defends. Everyone defends his treasure and will do so automatically. The real questions are, what do you treasure? And how much do you treasure it? Once you have learned to consider these questions and to bring them into all your actions, you will have little difficulty in clarifying the means. The means are available whenever you ask. You can, however, save time if you do not protract this step unduly. The correct focus will shorten it immeasurably. Any questions there? Yes, Elaine.
Okay, so reading those two paragraphs together, it really sounds as if what they're saying is that it's actually possible to deny the ego at some point, and that you can shorten the process of doing that. But it seems almost impossible to stop the ego. I mean, is that something that seriously we should strive to do?
That's what the course is all about.
No. and that's why it's a little bit perplexing to think that, that there could be, I guess maybe just because I personally am so caught up in the ego. I mean, it's been a part of me for these many years. It's hard to imagine that there would come a time that I wouldn't have the voice in my head or the thought that, was contrary to spirit. And do people actually live that way, John? Are there people on earth who are living without any ego?
I'm going to say yes.
Here I am.
See, we have one right here amongst us.
Thank you, Mr. Green Jeans.
So what is the mechanism of doing this? Remember, we're talking about the atonement. The mechanism here is a true forgiveness. That's how we deny the ego. So let me give you an example. The ego wants to hate. Sometimes we're in situations where people do things, or we read something in the news or what have you, and it gets us all hot and bothered, and we start getting angry, and we start getting into hate mode. I just hate that SOB, blah, 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 and start arguing. And that's ego. But we are capable of stopping ourselves at that point in our mind and looking at the situation differently and saying to ourselves, okay, you know what? I'm not going to get angry. I'm not going to hate anybody. That's just the ego playing tricks on me. I'm going to forgive the situation because it's not really happening. And instead, I'm going to turn to Spirit and ask Spirit to give me peace, to give me love. And that's kind of like the process. You can do that in your mind every time something happens to you that's obviously ego happening. You get mad, you get jealous, you get upset, whatever. You can go through that process of consciously realizing it, consciously forgiving it, consciously turning to Spirit and ask it to endow you with the opposite of that, with peace, with love, with understanding, with wisdom, and
Compassion,
with compassion,
empathy.
with empathy. Yes, there's all kinds of opposites for whatever's happening in the ego world. And by doing that, step by step, you walk yourself out of ego and into Spirit. And it's a process. It doesn't just, you can't do it just one time and expect to be resurrected. You know, it's a process. You do it step by step every time. You have to be vigilant. And in places in the book uses that same word, to be vigilant against the ego. So there is a process, and that process is atonement, which means the true forgiveness. That's how the atonement happens, through true forgiveness. So the means are available whenever you ask. You know, Spirit is always there, waiting to help us. We all have our own higher self. We all have the Holy Spirit within us. We all have that connection with God directly within us. And it's always there. But our higher self, the Holy Spirit, will not overpower our free will. If you want Spirit's help, you have to ask for it. You have to give permission for Spirit to help you. You do this when you forgive a situation in the ego and ask Spirit for help. As soon as you give permission, then the Spirit is, your higher self, the Holy Spirit within you, is able to help you while you're in the ego world. But you have to turn to Spirit, you have to ask, you have to give permission. So the means are available whenever you ask. You can, however, save time if you do not protract this step unduly. In other words, don't wait. Don't wait to ask for Spirit's help. Don't wait to forgive. Don't put it off. As soon as you're consciously aware of it, go through that process in your mind. And as you do that, the whole transformation from ego to Spirit will go quicker. It builds upon itself. The next time, it's not so hard to do it. The next time, it's not so hard to do it. The next time, it's not so hard to do it. The next time, it's not even happening. You've gone beyond it. Something else may come up to challenge you, but that challenge is gone because you've forgiven it and Spirit has helped you because you've asked. It's a process.
John,
Yes.
in the last year, I've been spiritually shut down because I'm disappointed in humanity and how I felt very hurt that we could treat each other the way we've been treated. And it seems quite recently that the spirit has returned, and I see things more clearly. When I'm angry and hurt, I shut down, and my life isn't smooth like it is when I'm in spirit. And I'm able now to recognize where I am, whether I'm in the ego world or in the spirit world. And it goes back and forth. Like you were saying, things happen, and I call it unconscious or unaware, or I'm holding back, and not being in spirit, not enjoying my life. And I go back and forth between the ego and the spirit world. And the reason I recognize it is because the flow of my poetry stops. I write spiritual poetry on oneness, and it comes to a halt. But I've learned to recognize this and pray or meditate, and I return to spirit.
Good.
And this whole, what I just said, all kind of came to me by reading what you've been reading tonight.
Yes. Yes, it is a process, and you do learn by taking these steps and going through the process. You do learn. And it's just like anything else. You want to play the piano, you got to practice, practice, practice. You want to get out of the ego world, you got to practice, practice, practice. So let's go on to paragraph 4, unless someone else wanted to say anything. Paragraph 4. The atonement is the only defense that can be used destructively because it is not a device you made. The atonement principle was in effect long before the atonement began. The principle was love, and the atonement was an act of love. Acts were not necessary before the separation because belief in space and time did not exist. It was only after the separation that the atonement and the conditions necessary for its fulfillment were planned. Then a defense so splendid was needed that it could not be misused, although it could be refused. Refusal could not, however, turn it into a weapon of attack, which is the inherent characteristic of other defenses. The atonement thus becomes the only defense that is not a two-edged sword. It can only heal. So before the separation, there was no need for atonement because everyone was in a state of love and it was 100%. And so there was nothing to forgive. because everybody knew that they were innocent. But after the separation, the atonement principle came into effect, healing and love through love and forgiveness. And the defense, it's a defense against the ego, not a defense against the spirit. It's the defense of spirit against the ego, and it can only heal. The atonement was built into the time-space belief to set a limit on the need for the belief itself, and ultimately to make learning complete. The atonement is the final lesson. Learning itself, like the classroom in which it occurs, is temporary. The ability to learn has no value when change is no longer necessary. The eternally creative have nothing to learn. You can learn to improve your perceptions and can become a better and better learner. This will bring you into closer and closer accord with the sonship. But the sonship itself is a perfect creation, and perfection is not a matter of degree. Only while there is a belief in differences is learning meaningful. Any questions on that? I think that's pretty straightforward. So just to remember that it says time and space did not exist before the separation because everything was eternity. There was no time or space. Time and space is a construct of the ego world. In reality, in the spirit world, time and space does not exist. Everything just is. As a matter of fact, there's one place in the Course in Miracles where it says that the only truth is this: God is.
God is the present moment.
No, God is. No qualifications. God is.
How about spirit and God, the same word?
Yes.
God is everything. Everything inclusive.
Yes. In the spirit world, the ego is not part of God. The ego world is not part of God. So, that's, oh, God created the heavens and the earth. Well, no, he didn't. We did. When we had that thought of separation and we created the ego world, we created the universe, the time and space, the heavens and the earth and the sun and the moon and everything else. That's all our creation inside the ego dream. It does not exist in the spirit world. So stop blaming it on God. People have blamed all kinds of things on God, hurricanes and the destruction of this and that, and all the Old Testament stuff that went on, and God's got a bad rap from the ego. Ego's always wanting to blame everything on God, but we created it ourselves, and we have to take that responsibility upon ourselves to realize that we have created our own world, and we are the only ones who can change it. And it all happens in our mind. It all happens by denying ego, forgiving, turning to spirit. So Paragraph 6, evolution is a process in which you seem to proceed from one degree to the next. You correct your previous mistakes by stepping forward. This process is actually incomprehensible in temporal terms because you return as you go forward. The atonement is the device by which you can free yourself from the past as you go ahead. It undoes your past errors, thus making it unnecessary for you to keep retracting your steps without advancing to your return. In this sense, the atonement saves time, but like the miracle it serves, does not abolish it. As long as there is need for the atonement, there is need for time. But the atonement as a completed plan has a unique relationship to time. Until the atonement is complete, its various phases will proceed in time. But the whole atonement stands at time's end. At that point, the bridge of return has been built. So, evolution is a process. And as we get into the understanding that the book is teaching us of being loving and forgiving and allowing the atonement to erase our past errors, and it brings us closer and closer to the end. But the Spirit looks back from the end of time and is waiting for all of us to come to it. And when the last person in the ego finally comes into the miracle, into the atonement, into the Spirit, then it'll all disappear because we would have woken up. And what happens to a dream when you wake up? It's gone. It's not real. It never existed. We dream every night, and then we think it's so real while we're in the dream. But then when we wake up, it's easily forgotten. I had this dream last night. I can't remember what it was, but and that's the way it is. The atonement is a total commitment. You may still think this is associated with loss, a mistake all the separated sons of God make in one way or another. It is hard to believe a defense that cannot attack is the best defense. This is what is meant by, quote, the meek shall inherit the earth. They will literally take it over because of their strength. A two-way defense is inherently weak precisely because it has two edges and can be turned against you very unexpectedly. Possibility cannot be controlled except by miracles. The miracle turns the defense of atonement to your real protection. And as you become more and more secure, you assume your natural talent of protecting others, knowing yourself as both a brother and a son. And again, for all of you ladies in the audience, the language of the Course is very masculine, but it's just for convenience sake. I mean, the book is already so long, and to say male and female every time, or brother and sister every time, would add like another 100 pages to it. It's said so often, the sonship, the daughtership. So just, forgive that. Just forgive that and move on. When it says son, it also means daughter. When it says he, it also means she. It's all of us, because in the spirit world, there's only one of us. There is no he and she in spirit world anyway. Even to speak of the Father in terms of that. In the spirit world, God, but you know, we're using the English language. We're using the language we have to try to help us understand a greater reality. But the language is limited, and so we're using the language that we have to try to get us to some means of understanding all that it's saying. But don't get hung up on certain words and religious words too, like Christ and all. Just don't get hung up on that. Okay, are there any other questions or concerns? We're getting to the end of the hour here now, and that was the end of section 2. Section 3 is coming up, the altar of God, and we'll pick up at that point next week. Yes, David.
It's taken a while, but and something I recognize early, in the course, you were just talking about, at least I interpret it that way, is we have to learn how to hear in other languages. Every word has another meaning, or that's not a good way to put it.
Well, some words have multiple meanings, and some words have nuances.
Like the Father, the Son. What I try to do is try to understand other religions, even though I don't practice them. However, I think we're all practicing the same religion. We're just giving it different descriptive words.
In a way, that's very true.
And I think that's where the course is good for me, is I can understand people. They're speaking, it sounds like another language, but it's really not another language. It's I have to learn about the oneness to understand what they're saying, and that they're saying the same thing I'm saying, but they're using different words and it sounds different. I think that's what I'm trying to say. Yeah.
Right.
And that brings the peace, the connectedness, the forgiveness, and and you're also saying about being what's the I'm having trouble with all my words. I think I'll let it rest like that at this point.
That's fine. You expressed what you were thinking. Anyone else? Oh, thank you, Helena. All righty then. It's time for last comments or questions. If there are none, then thank you for your participation this week. We do hope to see you again next week, and invite some friends if you know anyone else who might be interested in this. And I will get this posted on Facebook. I hope you saw that the last 2 episodes did get posted, and on YouTube and Facebook. And if you click on the link to on the Facebook page, ACIM Palm Beach Study Group on Facebook, and it takes you to YouTube, and you watch it on YouTube, you'll be able to subscribe to this channel. And if you do that, then you'll get an email. I believe that's how it works, when a new post is made on the ACIM channel. So that might be more helpful for you than going back and checking on Facebook to get a direct link. So if you subscribe to it, and you can leave some comments too, what have you, and feel free to share the link. If somebody might be interested and wants to know what it's like, just email them the link and share the link with them. All righty then, let's take a moment of silence, please, and then we shall end our meeting for tonight.